On Mother's Day, I accustomed the agenda and my babe fabricated me apprehended out loud. Roses are red, violets are blue. You're a abundant burden. No one wants you here. Everyone laughed at me. My name is Grace. I'm 74 years old, and that was the affliction abasement of my life. It was Sunday morning. The sun was streaming through the active allowance windows. Aback, I arrived at my babe Danielle's house to bless my day. I was cutting my favorite blooming dress, the one that always fabricated me feel elegant. I had brought beginning flowers and candied treats for my grandkids. "Grandma Grace," the little one shouted, active against me, their hugs abounding my affection with joy. For a moment, aggregate seemed perfect. Michael, my son-in-law, about greeted me with a quick, dry nod. Danielle came out of the kitchen with a smile that didn't ability her eyes. "Mom, so animated you made it. We accept the appropriate abruptness for you." I sat on the sofa, amidst by my family, the grandkids acclimatized at my feet, abounding of anticipation. Danielle pulled a blush agenda from her purse and handed it to me. "It's from all of us, Mom." Apprehended out loud so anybody can hear. My easily trembled hardly as I opened the envelope. The agenda had little flower assets the kids had made. How sweet, I thought. I started to apprehend in a clear, aflame voice. "Roses are red, violets are," my articulation cracked. The next words hit me like punches. "You're a heavy burden. No one wants you here. Your time has passed. It's time for you to go. Signed, your ancestors who can't stand you anymore." The blackout was oral for 3 eternal seconds. Then Michael started to laugh. An atrocious, biting laugh. Danielle covered her mouth, but I could see she was bedlam too. Alike the kids, not fully understanding, started to giggle because the adults were. "Did you see your face, Mom?" Danielle said between laughs. "You should accept a parent yourself, Michael. Did you get a picture?" My heart shattered. Tears began to roll down my channeled cheeks. The agenda fell from my abashed easily to the floor. "It's a loofah joke, Mom," Danielle continued, but there wasn't an ounce of remorse in her voice. "Don't booty it so seriously. You've consistently been so dramatic." Michael absolved over and picked up the agenda from the floor. "Yeah, Grace, we were aloof arena around. But you know," he paused uncomfortably, "lately you've been a bit too present. Maybe you should exceed added options." "Other options?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Well, you know," Danielle said, sitting in advance of me, "there are some really acceptable chief active communities for bodies your age. Places area you can be with bodies like you. You'd be more comfortable." The chat chief active rang in my head like a afterlife sentence. My own children wanted to get rid of me like I was old junk. But I anticipation my articulation was about a whisper. "I anticipation I was advancing to celebrate Mother's Day with you." "And you are, Mom?" Michael interjected in a condescending tone. "It's aloof time to be realistic. You're not adolescent anymore. You need appropriate affliction and we accept our own lives." The grandkids looked at me confused. The oldest, about 8 years old, came over and took my hand. "Grandma, why are you crying?" Before I could answer, Danielle pulled him away. "Come here, son. Grandma's fine. She's just actuality sentimental." I sat there, activity added alone than I had any time acquainted in my life. On the day that was declared to bless my motherhood, my own babe had publicly humiliated me, axis me into the family's atrocious joke. I boring got up, my legs shaking. I should aloof go. "Okay, Mom." Danielle didn't alike angle up to say goodbye. "Will alarm you later." I walked to the aperture with what address I had left, but central my apple had completely collapsed apart. That night, in my alone house, I cried until there were no added tears. But article had changed in me. The abasement had woken up something that had been abeyant for years. It was time for my ancestors to learn the accuracy about who adroitness really was. The abutting day, I blocked all of them. But first, I bear to remember how I had accustomed at such a painful moment. I sat in my admired armchair. The aforementioned one area I had nursed Danielle 45 years ago, and let the memories flow like a cine in my mind. It all started when I was 29 years old. Danielle's father alone us aback, she was only 3. One morning, he artlessly wasn't there. He larbored an agenda on the kitchen table. "I can't do this life. I'm sorry." He didn't alike say goodbye to his daughter. I bethink that night holding Danielle as she cried, allurement for her dad. "Daddy had to go far away, my love," I whispered, able myself that she would never go afterwards anything. And I kept that promise. I formed double shifts at the Bolt Culminate for 15 years. My easily were abounding of calluses from sewing uniforms backward into the night. Every added aroma I adored for Danielle's education. Aback she was 17 and capital to study nursing, I awash my mother's jewelry. It was the alone admired thing I owned, but I saw the ablaze eyes of my daughter talking about her dream. And I didn't alternate for a second. "Mommy, are you sure?" She asked me that day, completely sure. My love, your education is the best important thing. During her 5 years of university, I formed weekends cleaning offices. I would appear home with the Ashore back. But aback I saw Danielle studying at the dining allowance table. It was all annual it. The day of her graduation I cried with pride. We did it, Mommy, she said, adhering me tight. This wouldn't except been possible without you. Later, she met Michael. At first I admired him. He was polite, hardworking, and seemed to genuinely love her. Aback they got married. I paid half of the wedding. It was $12,000 that I had adored for years, but I capital my daughter to accept the bells of her dreams. Mom, this is too much, Danielle protested. Aback I handed her the check. Nonsense, I said, smiling. It's the most important day of your life. You deserve it. Aback they bought their Aboriginal home. I gave them the bottomward payment, $25,000. It was all I had saved, but seeing them happy in their new home, abounding me with satisfaction. Then the grandkids arrived, 2 admirable little ones who became the ablaze of my life. When Danielle alternate to assignment afterwards her maternity leave, I became their free babysitter. Every day for 3 years, I walked 6 blocks to their abode at 6:01 in the morning. I fabricated the kids' breakfast, dressed them, took them to the park, fed them, bathed them, and read them stories. Aback Danielle came home from work. The abode was clean, and the accouchement were happy. I don't know what we'd do afterwards, you Mom. Danielle used to acquaint me in those days. You're an angel. But gradually, article changed. The acknowledge yous became beneath frequent. My opinions about the accouchement started to be advised as interference. Aback I suggested that the youngest bear to see the pediatrician for his persistent cough. Michael told me, Grace, were the parents here? The Aboriginal time they spoke to me like that. I backward quiet. I thought maybe I'd been too nosy. Then the attenuate comment started. Mom, you don't accept the activity you acclimated to for watching the kids. Grace, I anticipate you got the kids' vitamins abashed again. Maybe you should blow at it at home. But I kept activity every day. I kept helping. I kept giving my all. 2 years ago, when Michael absent his job, I started giving them $500 ages so they wouldn't lose the house. It's just temporary, they said. Aloof until Michael finds article better. Michael began a new job 6 months later, but they never told me to stop sending the money. They aloof kept accepting it as if it were their right. Aback the kids needed new computers for school. I paid $2,000 afterwards, actuality asked. When Danielle's car bankrupt down, I gave them $4,000 for the repairs. Aback they wanted to acclimate the kitchen. I contributed $8,000. Little by little, I became the silent provider, the one who was consistently there to break their cyberbanking problems, but who was no best arrived to important family decisions. A year ago, Danielle organized a family dinner for Michael's birthday. I found out by adventitious aback one of my grandkids mentioned the abstruse affair they had. Why didn't you allure me? I asked Danielle over the phone. Oh, Mom, it was a absolutely baby thing, aloof the 4 of us. We anticipation you'd be bored. But I saw the photos on amusing media. There were 20 people, Michael's relatives whom I knew well. Anybody had been invited except me. That night I cried in silence. But I told myself it must have been an oversight. Oversights became a routine. They forgot to alarm me on my birthday. They canceled our lunch dates. Aback I showed up unannounced. They consistently seemed affronted by the interruption. But the final harbinger came 3 months ago. I was at their abode helping with banquet aback. I overheard Michael talking on the buzz on the patio. Yeah, my mother-in-law lives alone. She's getting absolutely dependent. No, she's not sick, but you apperceive how they are at that age. Yes, we're attractive at options to move her to a able place. I froze abaft the door. My own son-in-law was planning to get rid of me like I was old furniture. That night I couldn't sleep. I had accustomed my whole life, all my money, all my adulation to this family, and now I was aloof an obstacle they capital to get rid of. But they didn't apperceive article actual important about me, article I had kept secret for decades. My mother, afore she died, had told me about an ancestor's acreage in Nassau, Bahamas, that I affiliated aback I turned 70. It was a beachfront condo that had been active out for decades. The money had been accumulating in an account I never touched. I additionally had investments I fabricated with the inheritance from my Aunt Lucille, who died childless and larboard aggregate to me, bonds, stocks, certificates of deposit, money that grew agilely while I lived on my modest amusing Aegis check. In total, I had about $400,000 that my ancestors knew annihilation about. They thought I was a poor old woman active on government handouts. They didn't apperceive I had been anxiously allotment their comfortable activity for years, not out of need, but out of love. But afterwards, the humiliation of Mother's Day, something inside me bankrupt forever. It was time for them to apprentice Grace's accurate value. That cruel agenda was my wake-up call. I stayed up all night on Mother's Day, holding that agenda in my abashed hands. The words kept alveolate in my head. You're a heavy burden. No one wants you here. But as the tears broiled on my cheeks, something aberrant started to happen. The sadness adapted into article more powerful. Clarity, determination. For the aboriginal time in decades, I saw my situation with complete honesty. I wasn't a burden. I was the one keeping them afloat. I boring got up and went to my bedroom. I took a board box from my dresser that I hadn't opened in months. Inside were all my important documents, bank statements, deeds, investment certificates. As I looked through the papers, I did some brainy calculations that took my animation away. In the aftermost 5 years, I had accustomed Danielle and Michael exactly $67,000. $67,000 that they accustomed as if it were their accustomed right, while they treated me worse and worse. The bottomward acquittal on their house, $25,000. The wedding, $12,000. Monthly advice for 2 years, $12,000. The kids' computers, $2,000. The car repair, $4,000. The kitchen remodel, $8,000. And hundreds of small expenses that added up to $4,000 more. Meanwhile, I was still active in the same bashful house, cutting the same green dress on Sundays, walking to the grocery abundance to save on gas. But that wasn't what aching the most. What really broke my affection was canonizing how their treatment of me had changed. I remembered my oldest grandson's birthday 6 months ago. I had accustomed Aboriginal to help adorn as I consistently did. But when I agape on the door, Michael opened it with the attending of annoyance. Grace, the affair doesn't alpha until 3. Why are you so early? Anticipation I could advise with the preparations, I said with a smile. We don't charge any help. Danielle has everything beneath control. Behind him, I saw his mother, Brenda, hanging balloons in the active room. She had been arrived to help. I was treated like an blackballed guest. I can wait outside until 3, I mumbled, feeling humiliated. Don't be dramatic, Mom, Danielle said. Actualization from the kitchen, wiping her easily on an apron. You can stay, but don't get in the kitchen. You apperceive you get abashed with recipes. I got abashed with recipes. Me who had adapted for that ancestors for decades. That day, I sat in a bend of the patio like a drifter at my own grandson's party. I watched as Brenda helped with the aliment as the added guests complimented her on the block she had baked. Meanwhile, I, who had paid for half the costs of that party, was completely ignored. Aback it was time to sing Blessed Birthday, I backward in the back while anybody formed a circle around my grandson. No one noticed I wasn't in the ancestors' photos. Afterwards that night, my grandson came up to me as I was anxiously acrimonious up some dirty plates. Grandma, why were you so quiet today? I was aloof tired, my love, I lied. Grandma Brenda says, you're too old for big parties. The boy's words cut through me like knives. Brenda, who was alone 3 years adolescent than me, was telling my own grandkids that I was too old. But alike afterwards that humiliation. I kept giving them money, kept helping, kept acquisitive things would get better. How foolish I had been. I additionally remembered last Christmas. I had bought expensive gifts for everyone. A new bike for the oldest grandson, a book for the youngest, French aroma for Danielle, a power apparatus Michael had mentioned wanting. I spent about $3,000 on those presents. On Christmas Eve, I arrived with my easily abounding of beautifully wrapped packages. The kids ran to me excited, but Danielle Bound called them over. Kids, put Grandma's presents under the timberline with the others. We'll open them all calm tomorrow. My ability got absent amid the abundance of packages they had bought themselves. When it was time to accessible them, no one mentioned who had accustomed what. The kids vaguely thanked anybody for their gifts, but the best aching allotment came afterward. I had additionally brought a special gift for Danielle, a fair chaplet that had belonged to my grandmother. It was an aged piece, admired and abounding of family history. Mom, it's really pretty, Danielle said afterwards, even trying it on. But you know I don't wear a lot of jewelry. Maybe you should save it for aback the grandkids are older. She handed the box aback to me without a like aperture the brooch to see the chaplet up close. I had absurd that moment for months. Cerebration about how my daughter would look, cutting the same pearls that had adorned 3 generations of women in our family. That night, in my alone house, I cried. hugging the little fare box. It wasn't the budgetary amount that hurt. It was the total alienation to article that came from my heart. But the final straw came 2 months ago, back I got the flu. I was in bed for an anniversary with a agitation of about 102 degrees. I couldn't cook, could about get up to go to the bathroom. I alleged Danielle to ask if she could accompany me article to eat, or at Atomic ask how I was doing. Oh, Mom, we're so active appropriate now. Michael has a big activity at work, and I'm on a bifold about face at the hospital. Can't you ask a neighbor? But honey, I can about walk. Mom, you're not a little babe anymore. You accept to learn to booty affliction of yourself. We can't come running every time you get a cold. A cold. I had a aerial agitation and she called it a cold. She abashed up and didn't call back all week. It was Mrs. Johnson, my 82-year-old neighbor, who brought me homemade soup and fabricated a biding I took my medication. A woman I about knew showed more affair for me than my own daughter. Aback I assuredly recovered and returned to my accustomed of visiting my family. No one asked how I had been. It was as if that abhorrent anniversary had never happened. And now, sitting with those bank abstracts in advance of me, I understood with aching accuracy what my real abode was in my family's life. I wasn't the admired grandmother. I was the affecting ATM. Aback they needed money, there was Grace. Aback they needed a chargeless babysitter, there was Grace. When they bear a dupe for their frustrations, there was Grace. But when Grace bare love, care, respect, or simply a buzz alarm during an illness, Grace didn't exist. That night, I fabricated the hardest decision of my life. I took out my old laptop and logged into my online cyber banking for the first time in months. I had to accomplish some important changes. First, I canceled the automatic $500 annual alteration to Danielle's account. Second, I bankrupted the joint accumulation annual we had opened for family emergencies, which alone they used. Third, I afflicted my will. Everything I had appointed for Danielle and Michael would now go to a foundation for alone seniors. And fourth, I did something I never anticipated I would do. I bought an even ticket. It was time to see that acreage in Nassau I had inherited. It was time to alpha the life I deserved. But before I left, I was going to accomplish abiding my ancestors understood exactly what they had lost. It was Tuesday morning aback I accomplished my plan. I had slept for alone 3 hours, but for the aboriginal time in years, I felt completely awake, absolutely determined. I got dressed in my best affected gray suit, the one I had bought for Danielle's university graduation, but had about worn. I anxiously activated my makeup and styled my beard into a sophisticated bun. I capital to attending like the able woman I absolutely was, not the needy old adult they anticipation I was. First, I went to the bank. My financial advisor, Mr. Henderson, was abashed to see me so early. Mrs. Grace, how can I help you today? I charged to accomplish several important changes to my accounts, I said in a close voice. Over the abutting 2 hours, I absolutely reorganized my finances. I canceled all the automated transfers to Danielle's accounts. I bankrupted the joint account we had opened 3 years ago. I transferred money from my investments to my capital blockage account. Are you abiding about these changes, ma'am? Mr. Henderson asked, acutely worried. These are actual big moves. Completely sure. It's my money and I can do what I want with it. Then I went to my lawyer's office, Mr. Franklin, who had handled my family's acknowledged diplomacy for decades. I need to absolutely change my will, I announced afterwards preamble. Mr. Franklin, an earlier man who had accustomed me since Danielle was a child, took off his glasses and looked at me with concern. Grace, is Aggregate okay? This is a very desperate change. Aggregate is perfectly fine. For the aboriginal time in years, I see things with absolute clarity. I explained absolutely what I wanted. Everything I had appointed for Danielle and Michael would now go to a foundation for abandoned seniors. I additionally established a assurance for my grandkids that they could only admission aback they angry 25, and only if they maintained 18-carat acquaintance with me, not out of ancestors' obligation. Grace, don't you anticipate you should anticipate about it for a few added days? These decisions are irreversible. I've had 74 years to anticipate about it. Mr. Franklin and the aftermost 5 years have taught me aggregate I bear to know. I signed the abstracts with the abiding hand. There was no shaking, no doubt. My next stop was the biking agency. I had researched my acreage in Nassau all night. It was a 3-bedroom address in a beautiful neighborhood. It had been rented for years by a property management company, breeding income that was accumulating in a bohemian account I had never touched. I appetite to fly to Nassau this Friday, I told the travel agent. Is it a day trip or trip, ma'am? No, it's a liberation trip. I bought an Aboriginal chic ticket. If I was going to alpha my new life, I would do it in style. But before I left, I had to do one added thing. I had to address the letters. I got home at Apex and sat down at my desk. I took out elegant letterhead I had bought years ago, but never used. It was time to explain to my family absolutely what had happened. The first letter was for Danielle. My dearest daughter, by the time you read this letter, I will be on my way to Nassau, area I will alive in the property I affiliated from my ancestors that you didn't apperceive existed. I accept, fabricated the decision to cut all cyberbanking abutment I have been giving you for the accomplished few years. The $500 a ages you accustomed has been assuredly cancelled. The joint account you acclimated for emergencies has been closed. Don't booty this as a punishment, but as the assignment in independence that I should accept, taught you a continued time ago. For decades I gave you aggregate I had. My time, my money, my energy, my actual love. But at some point, you absolutely that I was a burden instead of a blessing. The Mother's Day agenda was artlessly the last straw, but the botheration started much earlier aback you chock-full seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as your claimed maid and clandestine bank. I have afflicted my will. My inheritance will now be accustomed to bodies who truly value generosity and ancestors' love. Your children will accept admission to a trust when they about face 25, but alone if they prove they can advance a genuine relationship with me. Do not attending for me for money. Do not alarm me to ask me to come back. Do not accelerate the grandkids to emotionally dispense me. If you really want to get your mother back, you're going to accept to prove that you amount me for who I am, not for what I can give you. Your mother, who has finally learned to amount herself. Grace. The second letter was for Michael. Michael, I never saw you as aloof my son-in-law. I accepted you as the son I never had, but you angry me into the awkward mother-in-law you capital to get rid of. I heard your buzz chat 3 months ago, aback you were talking about finding a able abode to move me as if I were old appliance accepting in the way. What you didn't apperceive is that a able place was consistently in my hands. I accept a property in Nassau, investments that generate added money than you accomplish in a year, and the cyberbanking abandoned to live wherever and about I choose. For years, I agilely adjourned your comfortable lifestyle. I paid for repairs, helped with expenses, covered emergencies. I did it out of love, not obligation. But you interpreted my generosity as weakness, my availability as dependency, my adulation as an annoyance. Now you will have to angle on your own 2 feet. After I accomplished the letters, I put them in an envelope and larboard them on my coffee table, accessible to be discovered. Then I sat in my active room smiling. It had taken me 74 years, but I had finally abstrused the best important lesson of my life. You advise bodies how to amusement you by what you are accommodating to accept. For decades, I accustomed crumbs of adulation because I was abashed of being alone. But it turns out that actuality alone was always bigger than actuality with people who didn't annual me. And now that I had abstrused that, I wasn't really alone at all. I was free. I was activity to Nassau. And for the aboriginal time in a long, long time, I was aflame about my